Welcome everybody tonight. We have a Halloween program for you here. We had George with us, George Willeman, back in was it August, I think, and he did a program for us, and he mentioned that they had this Frankenstein film at the Library of Congress Nitrate Film Vault that had been restored, and that he could possibly do a program on that. So we thought that sounded like fun. So he's coming back to share that with us tonight, along with some other films. But I am going to start with a little slideshow of some scary stuff from our collections. And this is started from a exhibit that we did initially in 2012, and we did it again in 2015. And we've shared it before online, of the staff decided what things freak us out in the collection. So we all kind of got to pick our things, and we each kind of wrote a little bit of the text for that exhibit that we had up. This is a great picture, one of my favorite pictures of our building that a local photographer, Andy Grimm, had captured a number of years ago of our clock tower at night. So I just love this picture. It's very spooky, and that's probably about how our building looks just about now. So we're recording this, and if anyone ever sees the recording stop, let me know, because we lost the last recording that we did because it stopped somewhere at the beginning. So this will be available later. And well, I'm just going to jump right into it. So we start with our creepy medical instruments, which I'm sure lots of museums have a lot of these kinds of things. We've got some tray finds up at the top there, and I don't suggest really Googling any of these things to find out a lot more information, because you might find some gross, weird pictures. But you can see the very scary portion of the tray find up here, and that's used for drilling small holes, mostly in skulls. They're actually still used today. When we were doing research for these, we found that that's pretty much what they still look like, that you can order for medical catalogs and that are being used. We also have a lot of early 19th century medicine and things that were used for like bloodletting. So we've got some lancets down here that are spring loaded, so you pop out some very scary blades from those. And then if anyone's seen any of the electric shock home therapy things, we got this one. It's a little hand crank
do today as well, our next show, which I will
patent electric machine.
So welcome.
And just 1 second.
Up right now.
If someone, I think I'm going to go ahead and mute real quick and then go back to share. You guys can unmute yourselves. There we go. Okay, so the violet ray would, you could hook up little glass electrodes to various parts of your body, and they were to administer electric shock that was supposed to be advertised as a cure for everything, from chronic pain and skin disease, all sorts of things. But that's one of the two machines that we have in our collection here. Next, we've got some very creepy things that are very much in line with things that were made here in Springfield and big industry. With the funerary industry, we had Metallic Casket. There was the Springfield Coffin and Casket Company that I just found a picture of yesterday, and Champion Chemical. And they made various, like Champion Chemical made embalming fluids. So we do have an autopsy table in our collection. We also have a cooling table. And if you've been in the museum, you'll see we have an area set up with a hearse and a cooling table and various autopsy tools, which I am glad that's one of the things that we don't have specifically labeled in the museum, because I feel some things it's just better not to know all of the details. So those are some things that if you think too hard about them, they become even creepier. But they are very much a part of our local history and things that were made here. Does anyone have any idea what this wreath is made out of?
Hair.
Yes. It's one of, I think, 3 hair wreaths that we have. This is the smaller, more easily portable of them. We have a very, very large one that takes about 4 people to move. But the hair art was something that came out of the Victorian era with Queen Victoria. She famously mourned for her husband for 40 years, and she was known to wear a piece of jewelry made out of her husband's hair. The thing with hair art is that it's not necessarily made from the deceased. A lot of people would collect hair, so we've got in our collection a hair receiver. You can see here that I remember Virginia talking about this, remembering her grandmother collecting hair and having a hair receiver. And I know my husband always complains that with all of the hair that we have on our house, we could make sweaters and scarves out of it. So that could be something that could come back with people today. But they're very beautiful, and it shows, you know, it's a very intricate piece of artwork, but super creepy. Another thing that we have that is very creepy is the headstone of Jonathan Donnell. It was never placed at his grave. It was found in I think it was the loft of the smokehouse on the property many years later. And we're not sure why it was never placed. I think it's not entirely clear where he is buried. But his home is no longer standing. I think Bob tried to find it one time, Bob Holsizer, and we talked about going out to we know where the property is, but it's now behind another home and way back beyond the train tracks. But this was something that was given to the Historical Society when it was discovered in the 30s. But again, it's a bit creepy kind of thing to have in the collection.
And what is this house?
This is the Jonathan Donnell house. It's no longer standing. I think it was on Lower Valley Pike, I believe. I know we tried to figure out exactly where it had been located, and I think we found it on Google Maps at one point based on where the train tracks had been from this picture. But he had first arrived in the area in 1795, so he was definitely one of the very earliest settlers in the area, and Donnellsville is named after the family. This is one that was my pick for creepy things. I do not like creepy eyes. I think that Samuel Shellabarger, the local congressman who served in Congress, has very creepy eyes. And this is a portrait that we have of him in the museum, and it's always creeped me out whenever I walk past it. He seemed to get slightly less creepy as he got older. That's the one that we have on the second floor in our political exhibit. But I'm very much a sucker for creepy eyes and haunted houses and things like that. So that's something that bothers me, and I think about it a lot sometimes when I'm walking through the museum alone about all of the pictures up there. So that's one of my particular things that creeps me out. Here we've got a very famous one in our this was famously around museums and traveling around the country. The Fiji mermaid was originally something that P.T. Barnum's creation, but there was a lot of copycats. This is our particular merman along the same style. It is a mix between a monkey and a fish, and you can find it out in our out in the galleries. We have a cabinet of curiosities, which is kind of an homage to old museum setups and things that would have been shared and displayed in the museum. But definitely super creepy. This is one that when we first did the exhibit, we talked about how scary water was, and we had a couple pictures of some slightly wet boxes, and we talked about, we said, what on earth is so scary about water? Well, we can definitely assure you now that water is destructive and terrifying, because it really did a doozy on our collection last year when we had a water pipe burst on the third floor in the archives wall, and it poured through the east end of the building down on the first and second floor. So if you'll recall, if anyone was on the behind the scenes tour that we did last month, we shared a lot more details about what water exactly did to us. But you can see some pictures here of it meant we had to move all of our collections, absolutely all of our collections, everything from the artifacts and everything in the archives. We were spread all throughout the building, and then we had to rebuild from the ground up to put our shelves and everything back together. So we're still recovering from that. So we can definitely tell you that water, whether it comes from above or below or whatever, is very, very destructive. We've got lots of scary, rusty tools throughout the collections. We've got the flax hackles that are used for in the process of making clothing, they look terrifying and like something you would see in a horror movie. We've got lots of rusty sickles and shovels and things like that, you know, they show evidence of use, and people in Clark County use them, but also very creepy. And you want to make sure you have your tetanus shot if you're working with stuff in our collection. This is one that, not a creepy painting, but this is, the picture on the right is a self-portrait of Godfrey Frankenstein, one of the Frankenstein family of artists that came to Springfield in, I think, they came to America in the 1830s. I'm not sure exactly when they came to Springfield, but they were a family of 6 siblings that were all artists, and I believe the father was an artist as well. And we think that the family named themselves Frankenstein after the father had won a art contest painting the Frankenstein castle. So their original name was Tract, so it was not Frankenstein. But they have a number of pieces between the siblings that are at the Springfield Museum of Art, and we have a few in our collection. This is one by Godfrey Frankenstein, and we also have his self-portrait in the collection. And that the name, and I don't know if George is going to talk about this, you know, it became associated with shuffling scary monsters after Mary Shelley. So I think the Frankenstein's castle would have been obviously before her story. So she kind of changed the name, or changed the game of the name. This is something that people in archives or people with paper, if you have collections at home, silverfish and things that like to eat paper are a very scary thing to think about. This was a picture that I found from a archivist blog for, you know, so we are very, we try to keep on top of our pest control, but you know, if we ever see evidence of things, we get very scared in our collections. So that is a thing that is scary to us. A couple more things that we had on display when we did the exhibit in 2012. We've got a scourge here, like a whip with nasty little barbs on it. Not a fun piece. I'm not entirely sure why it's in our collection or where it came from. I can't remember if we figured that. We probably figured that out when we originally did the exhibit. But and then again, this one on the back here is definitely one of my scariest things. Creepy dolls. I do not like creepy dolls. And this is a from the Wren's department store window at Christmas time. And I definitely do not like walking past. We have 2 of them. I don't like walking past those guys down in the basement. They're not one of my favorite things in the collection. So we do have a plethora of creepy dolls like that. Just wanted to share a couple other fun things. I think Patty's on the call here. She's a collections volunteer. She's been working on a big family collection, and she brought in a lot of Christmas and Halloween decorations that had been part of her family collection. So we really appreciated that, because that was something we really didn't have anything of in our collection. So it's nice to represent all the different holidays. People like to see that stuff, and these are fun to look at. These are, I was looking them up today. I think a lot of it's from the 1930s. So neat pieces that we've got here. And then just some fun. This is Bob. It's just labeled as Bob. It's one of our favorite pictures. Bob looks like he's a lot of fun. Not scary at all. And then we've got some kids here in some little devilish Meeks Halloween costumes that they got from Meeks Sporting Goods. That picture is from 1927. And then a couple of local ads. This is 1974, and I picked these because this was the state was showing Frankenstein, Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, and the Majestic was showing both Bela Lugosi's Dracula and Boris Karloff's Frankenstein at the same time. So I thought that was pretty cool. We don't have the date on that, but they both came out, I think, around 1931. So it must have been obviously sometime after that. So I think that's all I have. And I thank you for going along with this little slideshow. The real fun's coming up with George here. So I will stop sharing. And
now it's my
George,
turn?
yes. So you can go. George is going to share some fun stuff with us tonight. So
right.
I'll let you
no
go ahead and
pressure. Well, thank you all for hanging out this long. And if you are a comeback from the last time I was here, you are a glutton for punishment. So I thank you for coming back. What I originally we thought about just showing the Edison Frankenstein film and talking a little bit about that. But then I thought, well, we need to have a little bit about how the Frankenstein film kind of came to be anyways, what preceded it. Because by the time they did Frankenstein in 1910, we'd already had films for, 12 years or so. And so there had to be something before that. So what I wanted to talk about first is a French filmmaker named George Méliès, who's been one of my favorites since I was a kid. First, because he's a director named George. Second of all, because he is basically, if a person could be said to have created special effects, it was George Méliès. And he did it almost by accident, if you can believe the legend. Basically, George Méliès was a magician. He had a magician theater, magic theater in Paris, and he was always looking for new things. And when motion pictures started coming out, he was like, "Oh, this would be something great to have with my magic shows." So he went to the Lumiere brothers and tried to buy a camera. They would not sell him a camera, so he built his own movie camera and started going around shooting things. And he was doing the same thing everybody else did. He was shooting, a woman feeding chickens and things coming down the street, just things that moved to show in his theater. And the legend is that at one point he was filming a truck or a wagon coming down the street, and his camera jammed. When he got the film freed up and he shot the rest of the roll, he went and processed it. And when he looked at it, as the wagon went down the street, it got to a part of the screen, and all of a sudden it changed into a hearse and continued on. And he saw this, he realized that was where the camera had stopped moving. He begins experimenting with starting and stopping his camera and doing different effects with it. And I mean, by like 1899, he is doing a film of Cinderella. While here in America, we're still doing the woman feeding chickens and, children playing and stuff like that. We didn't really get into stories until 1902 or 1903, depending on, what you consider a story film. Now, one of the nice things about working in film preservation is the people you get to know. And one of my good friends is a gentleman named Serge Bromberg, who lives in Paris. He owns a company called Lobster Film. And Serge has been actually working recently with the French government to preserve and restore every Georges Méliès film that still exists. And Méliès, in his short time of production, he stopped around 1912, still managed to grind out almost 1,000 movies. I think Serge told me they have located about, I don't know if they found 400 yet, but it seemed like it was like in the 370s, which is pretty amazing for films that are now well over 120 years old. So when we were going to do this, I wrote to Serge and said, "Hey, do you have any like Halloween themed ones that you could send me?" And he was like, "Of course, yes." I'm not going to do my horrible French accent, but I'm going to start out and just show you one of the films that he said. Well, I've got a couple of them actually, but we'll start with this little short one, which is just a really great way to start a presentation like this. If I can find it, where is it? Oh, here it is. Let's try this one. Play. So there you go. And a couple things to say about that one. That was an extra special print. Not many of the color prints survived. It was something you could buy if you wanted to spend the extra money for it. And basically in that one, they basically hand painted every single frame of the film. Like I said, only a few of those have survived. I'm guessing only a few of them were made to begin with. Also should point out the gentleman playing Mephistopheles there, kind of controlling the whole thing, was George Méliès himself. He often stars in his own films. He also, well, he wrote them, he directed them, he stars in them, he painted the sets. He had this beautiful little studio outside of Paris that was all made of glass. And if you have seen the movie Hugo, that is the filmmaker in the movie Hugo who works in the little toy store, little toy and candy store in the train station. So these are the actual films that he did. I'm going to do one more here and maybe a second one. This one is just, it's really hard to describe. He pulls out all the stops on this one, and it's almost like a little musical number that he would have thrown into one of his shows. There's no real story, but there's lots of dancing. And I don't know who did the music for this. Serge may have done it himself because he is a pianist and organist. But it just has, I'm just going to play it just for the music. Let me find it here for us. Where is it? Here it is. All right. Whoops. Share. And here we go. No, And there you have it. I love that. Oh, thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
I have lots of questions.
Okay. If
I was
anyone,
like,
actually, if anyone has any questions about the Méliès films, go right ahead, and then we'll go on with Frankenstein.
I've got some just questions about logistics of all of that. I mean, that was 1903. Like, is that fire in there?
Yeah.
That's
in a wooden studio.
That's amazing.
With painted sets and nitrate film in the camera. Yes.
That's he was a brave man.
They went hard back then.
As far as I know, he did not have any disastrous fires. I've never heard of him having one in his studio. So yeah, he knew how to control it. Being a theater person, of course, he knew theater craft and theater magic. So that stage is full of trapdoors. You can see them better in some films than others. And so you've got people bouncing up and out of those trapdoors and things dropping down in the background. And there's some that they made enormous puppets for that show up. There are some where he is doing forced perspective, where he'll have a little tiny person and then a full-size person. One of my favorites is the man with the India rubber head, where he puts his head on a stand and blows it up with a pair of bellows until it explodes. And it's amazing because it's him, of course, it's Méliès, but the head is not still. It's like as it gets bigger and bigger, and then it pops. So I just had this amazing mind to do these technical things so early on, when, of course, at the same time, we were still, woman with chickens and children in the yard, parades and stuff like that. And the Great Train Robbery, which also has special effects in it that a lot of people don't notice. Go ahead.
Very, very impressive and very cool especially for the time. That's amazing.
Yeah, and of course, the one he's most famous for, Trip to the Moon, has recently been restored. They actually found one of the hand-painted prints, which I think you can see on YouTube. Look it up. It's amazing.
I sent you one today, George, that was set to the Smashing Pumpkins song that I remembered. That was that I said that looks like a Smashing Pumpkins video, and looked it up. Yes, it was a George Méliès based video.
And unfortunately, that was his undoing too, because by 1912, if you look at films that he made in 1912, they still look like the ones from 1903. There's no camera movement because he's doing all these special effects. You can't move anything. At least hadn't figured it out yet. And a lot of other people had moved on to other things, and cinematography was becoming a big deal. Editing, cutting angles, stuff like that. And he suddenly found himself not unsaleable. And he went bankrupt. And basically in a fit of pique, and this is shown in Hugo also, he destroyed his studio and burned everything. Amazingly though, he had a brother, Gaston Méliès, who lived here in the States and ran the American branch of Star Films. And so George would send negatives of everything that he was making to Gaston to distribute here, because even then, pirates were a serious problem, and Méliès films were getting pirated everywhere. So he sent his brother to kind of try and stem that. Well, after Gaston Méliès died here in the States, and Star Films went out of business, but the negatives survived, and they moved around. They ended up, I think, at Vitagraph. And at some point in the 1930s, the cartoon producer Leon Schlesinger, whose cartoons came out through Warner Brothers and whose studio created Bugs Bunny and Porky Pig, bought these Méliès negatives from Vitagraph and gave them to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. And then in the 1960s, the Academy gave them to the Library of Congress. So we now have them. We have these original Méliès negatives, and to actually look at one is truly astounding because, like I said, they're all over 120 years old now. We are actually, about a month ago, we sent a bunch of them to Paris for this government project where they are scanning them at 8K. And what they're doing is they're trying to find every existing copy of each one of these films, and then they are stitching them together, a frame here and a frame there. It's quite an amazing project, and a lot of things are being seen for the first time since they were released. There's always like I said, there's always the really popular one like Trip to the Moon, but some of the other ones like the Infernal Cauldron and the Cakewalk, I'd never seen either one of those. And if we have time at the end, I have one other little short one called Satan in Jail that I also had never seen before. That's a lot of fun. So, any other questions about Méliès? I will say also, if you want to see more Méliès, there's some on YouTube, but Serge has put together fairly large collections of these that are out on DVD and Blu-ray. You can find them on Amazon, and each one usually contains 50 or 60 of his films because they're really short for the most part. And I highly recommend them. They're always a lot of fun. So, okay, anything else? Anything on Méliès? Nope. Okay. Well, let's move on then. The Edison Frankenstein film is one of fascination, not so much for itself, but just for the way it came to us. And this gets into talking about film collectors. Back in the 1970s, the AFI created a list of the top 10 lost American films. And the Edison Frankenstein was on there because it had not been seen since it was released in 1910. Well, up in Cudahy, Wisconsin, there was a gentleman, and I've got a picture of him here. Let me find his picture. Here he is. Okay. This gentleman right here. Can you see him? Because I can't see his picture right now. Okay. That is Al Dettlaff. And Mr. Dettlaff worked for the Vacuum Oil Company, but he was a film collector. His father had given him a toy film projector as a child. And in years later, they interviewed Al's father, and his one comment was, "I wish I'd never given him that damn projector." Al got really into film collecting. Another relative, I think it was an aunt, had someone in her family who had been a showman back in the silent era and had kept a bunch of the prints and a projector, stuff like that. And one of the prints that they'd kept was Frankenstein. So Al had this for quite a while. And then when this list came out, he just, here's a guy who worked for the oil company who suddenly realized he had one of the top 10 rare lost films in the world. So he began working at trying to get it out there and get noticed, while at the same time keep his film for himself. He would not let anybody see it at first. Finally, he got talked into going to film festivals once in a while. He would take the original nitrate with him. He did allow a laboratory to make a 35 millimeter duplicate of it and a 16 millimeter duplicate of it, and they would take it along. But there were several times in his last years when they would show it, he would make them put at the bottom of the screen, "Stolen from Al Dettlaff," in case anyone was videotaping it. Now, finally, about a year or so before he passed away, a gentleman, an author up in Baltimore, Fred Weibel, who actually has written a really good book about the history of just Edison Frankenstein and Al Dettlaff, got Al to look into sharing it and getting it out on DVD. And he did finally put it out on DVD. I don't think the DVDs made it out too much before he actually passed away. So they are out there somewhere. But of course, immediately someone took it and copied it, and Al's copy's up on YouTube as well. But like I said, Al got really wrapped up in this thing, and to the point of alienating his family and friends. And he's sort of become, to me anyways, the poster child for why film collecting, or any kind of collecting, if you let it go too far, is not a good thing for you. Because in his last years, I guess he had an aneurysm. And he survived. When he got home from the hospital, of course, it would be a long, long time before he was back on his feet and going again. So his daughter was working with him and trying to get him, and he was just being just irascible, just really hard to deal with. And her husband said, "Look, you know what he's like. Let's just leave him alone. He'll be fine. If he needs anything, He'll call us. Okay, so she, left Al to his own devices. So they didn't hear from him for like 3-4 weeks. So they finally went to check on him, and he had died about a month before, in the heat of summer, and it was laying on the floor of his living room. I won't go any farther than that about that part of the story. The real irony was that the daughter lived across the street from him. So about 10 years go by after that, and we are contacted by the family. I think they had some medical expenses, and they wanted to sell Al's collection. So the library had some money at this point. At the end of the fiscal year, we had some money that had to be spent. So we bought Al's collection. And sure enough, it shows up in big barrels. They sent a company up to pack it for us, and it came in big barrels. And I had someone around with a camera so that they could take, let me see, where is it? This picture. Whoops, oh, I don't want to leave meaning. What am I doing? I almost knocked myself out. There we go. This picture, when I found the print of Frankenstein in the barrel, and that is the can, and we have preserved that can. It's sitting in our office. That is the can that Al kept Frankenstein in with his special homemade label on it. And actually, the can is almost more interesting than the film. It's a beautiful zinc Paramount can, probably from the teens. Oops. There we go. Okay. So we got it in there, and the print itself, this is what's so amazing. After all the abuse that it had over the years of being carted all over the world and people allowed to just pick it up and handle it, it was in really nice condition. Here it is. This is the actual print. As like I say, levitating down the hallway of the nitrate vaults. It does that from time to time. As you can see, it's fully tinted. All those rings of color you see on there are the different colored scenes that you will see in there in the print. To this day, it is still amazingly good condition. It is not deteriorating. You always hear about nitrate film rotting away, and it does. I can tell you that. But this print, because it was made before World War I, at a time when the film was of the highest quality and was not being made in such huge batches, it was more of an artisanal craft. We find that for whatever reason, these prints made before World War I have incredible staying power. They just don't deteriorate unless they interact with a film that has already started going. They just stay. They'll get brittle, they'll shrink, but they will not chemically deteriorate. So, onto the film itself. Talking about, here is the cover of the Edison kinetogram at the time that the film came out. You can see it was released in March, and there's Charles Ogle as the monster. Created his own makeup to play the monster. So, but Frankenstein was just one of a large series of films that Edison was putting out. Came out in March. It was trotted out, shown for a few weeks, pulled off the screen, and that was the end of it. And they moved on. It was, no better or no worse than any other Edison film at the time. And of course, most of the prints were probably trashed when they came back to the Edison depot. And since it was made in 1910, Edison had a big fire in West Orange that took out a lot of their plant. And the negative for Frankenstein was probably lost in that fire. So there could not be any more prints. So this print that Al had somehow ended up, I mean, if it was up in like Wisconsin, way up in the far northern region, no one was going to pay to send it back. So it just stayed up there. Excuse me. All right. Hang on, let me see what the next picture I want to show you is. Okay. Here is another picture from the Edison magazine showing it, how they advertised it and how long it was. I always like how they say a liberal adaptation of Mrs. Shelley's famous story. Yes, it's very liberal. It's like how you compress an entire book into 16 minutes. Now, the trick is with these films, I have found a lot of films made of famous properties like Frankenstein or the book Ramona, they're like 16 minutes long. So they will never try to actually tell a whole story. What they will do is give you the best bits because they expect that you as the viewer have read the book or you've seen the play. So you already know the story. Ramona is another really good example because, the book Ramona is a great big thing. And, the features are an hour and a half and there's a lot of story in there. But the book, the film, the Edison film, the biograph film of it, is again about 16 minutes and just has the highlights or low points of the story within that time. And most of the ones I've seen, it's the same way. And I finally realized that one day, oh, it's a best of. They're not going to do that. They're not going to show you the whole story. So the film came to us, and of course we wanted to get it preserved and scanned and out to the public as fast as possible because it was such a big deal and everybody's wanting to see it. But the print was missing a couple things. It was missing the opening title and it was missing the first intertitle. So I wrote to the people up at Edison, do you have anything in your files on the Edison Frankenstein film? And they sent me two things. The first thing they sent me was this. And this is the cover of an envelope that is in the files up at Edison. And it gives us the information of who shot the film, when it was shot, where it was shot. And then you see Librarian of Congress. Basically, they send it in for copyright to the Library of Congress. Now, that made me think, oh, maybe we have the paper prints. No, we did have paper prints, but they have mysteriously vanished somewhere a long, long time ago. They're probably in somebody else's basement. But the other thing they sent me, and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to create the opening credit from just what other opening credits look like. So they sent this. And it's the original opening credit. That was the piece of paper that was inside that envelope. It's a fragment of a paper print showing the original opening title. So when you see the film, you will actually get to see, probably for the first time since 1910, the original opening title to the movie. Now, the first title was missing. I had an idea of what it said. Al had actually made up one, but I wanted to make one that looked a little more authentic. So, and when you see it, I hate giving away secrets, but I actually took letters from other titles in the film and sort of made like a ransom note kind of thing, even making some of them crooked so that it looked like the rest of them. You'll see when we actually watch the film. So I ended up watching this movie about 150 times, and that was more than enough. So, but it got done, and we wanted to present it really well, and we knew it needed music. So we have several composers that we work with a lot, and one of them, Donald Sozin, great silent film composer, and very much in demand, and one of my favorites too. He got the job of doing the score for it. And when I got the score from him and I tied it back to the film and synced it up the way he wanted, it brought the film to life. I was amazed at how good the film becomes with the music. It just shows you the power of really good music. It brings the film to life. Now, to talk a little bit about the film itself, it's an Edison production, and Edison productions are not my favorites. The thing about Edison is that it was product. It was like phonograph records or light bulbs or spark plugs or anything else that Edison was grinding out. It was a product, and it was there to make money. So there wasn't a whole lot of artistry in a lot of Edison films, which is why when you hear people talk about early cinema like this, they don't often talk about Edison ones. One, because a lot of them are lost. Two, because a lot of them just aren't very good. A lot of great people came out of the Edison studio, but they certainly didn't stay there. The Edison studio went basically up the spout about 1917 because they could not compete. Other people had come in, people like Carl Laemmle, who started Universal, William Fox, who started Fox Pictures, had gotten out there, and they were the ones who were starting to make longer films and more important films, and they had the money to bankroll big stars, and Edison wasn't willing to spend that kind of money on this project. So pretty soon, they tried at the very end to do bigger films and features. It was just too little too late, and so they closed down the studio. And again, a lot of the stuff probably just got destroyed at that time because nobody wanted it. They're just old movies. Nobody cared. Nobody went to see them, a lot of them when they were new. So that's why so many Edison films just don't exist anymore. a lot were uncovered in the 40s in the collection of a gentleman named George Cliney, who was one of Edison's distributors. He had kept a lot of that material, and the Library of Congress got it, and we now have it. Unfortunately, in the 40s, there was no real idea of film preservation like there is now. So the nitrates that came to the Library of Congress, since they had no place to store them, they had to copy them and get rid of the originals. They sent them to the only film lab available to them in Washington, D.C., which was at the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Agriculture copied all these films onto 16 millimeter stock and then destroyed the originals. So we have none of the original Cliney material. It's all gone. And there's some really great stuff in there. And some of it looks pretty good. And some of it is just like, was there anyone actually watching this machine run while it was doing this? Because it's all out of focus. But they do survive. And now people are finding interesting things in there. And they're starting to show up on DVD now. Oh, there's a question. What is this? Oh, the elephant film. Okay, you know what? I should have brought that. Okay. There is a film, a very early Edison film. There was a circus elephant, I think it was, that had killed someone. Can't remember if it killed a trainer or it killed a bystander. And so they decided that they had to put the elephant down because it had killed someone. So they got Edison and Edison's men to create a big grid on the ground. I have seen this film, and actually you probably can find it on YouTube. It may be on the library's website also. So basically in the film, they lead the elephant out onto this big metal grid and everybody gets away from it. And after about 20 seconds or so, all the smoke begins rising from the elephant's feet. And then after about another 15 seconds, she just falls over. So that's how they executed the elephant, but they made a film of it too. And as Edison proved that, electricity could be dangerous. Now, whether he used AC or DC current, I don't know, because of course, he was also going through the big battle with Tesla and Westinghouse over AC and DC. So I bet if you look deep enough, he probably was using AC power just to show how dangerous it was. So, well, speaking of electricity, let's get back to Frankenstein. Yes, it is. Kirby, I agree totally. It is very hard to watch, which is probably another reason why I didn't think about it until John mentioned it. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay, I'm getting distracted now, guys. Where was I? What was I talking about? Oh, okay. So again, they made this film at the Edison studio in New York, and it came out and disappeared. We put it back together. We put a score onto it. And actually, if you like it and you want a copy for yourself, you can go up to the library's website. We have this part of our website called the National Screening Room, and just search for Edison Frankenstein, and you can download, I'm not sure if it's full 2K, but it's at least, I think, a 1080p with the score attached to it and everything. You can show it to your friends. You can do anything you want to it. It's public domain. You can re-edit it. You can take stuff out. You can shorten things. You can do anything you want. Make a new music video out of it. I don't care. Go ahead. All right. That's all I really want to say about that. Let's watch the movie. Here it is from 1910, courtesy of Edison and the late Al Detlaff. Here is Edison's Frankenstein. And there you go. Any questions? Questions, comments?
How long did that take to do the restoration?
About two or 3 months, I think, between the laboratory. Our laboratory had to take the film and go through it pretty much inch by inch and make sure the sprocket holes were all repaired and all the splices were good. And then, excuse me, it had to go up and be scanned. And then it was turned over to me, and it took me a while. Well, I had to get a hold of Edison. They surprised me with that nice title, and then I had to create a new title image to put in. I did that. For those of you who are interested, that was done in Final Cut Pro. And then Donald did the score for it. I think he had the score back to us within a month. So 3 or 4 months it took to put that together. Any other questions?
There's a question from Karen. How did the still of the monster become so famous? And is that why it was on the list of most sought after films?
I'm guessing so. I mean, because that is a great still. That is, I remember seeing that as a kid and just, what is this thing, you know, and hearing about it. And I think also it's kind of like London After Midnight is the same way. There's that great, again, still of a monster that is so entrancing of Lon Chaney with the pointy teeth and everything like that. When and if the film is discovered, a lot of people I think are going to be very disappointed in it. Because if you've seen the Sound remake, Mark of the Vampire, it's not a very good story at all. It's very disappointing. But it will be great. It would be great to see Chaney as the vampire doing his vampire things. So I'm always hoping they find that one just so people will stop talking about it. But yeah, I think that is a good reason. I think, Karen, that is exactly the reason why it became such a big deal, is because it's an early example of fantasy, science fiction, horror cinema in the United States. Probably one of the very first, if not the first. So it would definitely be something that they'd want to have.
Kirby Taylor said he saw this at Mostly Lost, impressed with the creative creation of the creature, and this was early in film to use reverse. So how can you talk about the reverse? Is that reversed?
Yeah, the whole sequence of the monster being created in the big cauldron. Basically, they started with the mannequin, the finished mannequin, and set it on fire and filmed it. And either in printing, they printed it backwards, or more likely, they put the camera upside down, and then when they reversed the negative, then it could, you know, they could print it forwards and it would run backwards. One of several different ways, but whatever they did, that is all done with the film running in reverse. Because if you watch it closely, if you watch it again, you'll see that the smoke is coming down into the cauldron. But yeah, it's a really interesting way of doing it. And yes, Frankenstein is he's just unbound basically by this, and until the very last thing when he sees how hideous it is. And another nice thing to think about, the next shot where Frankenstein is in his room all upset and the monster comes through the curtains, you do realize the monster is naked at that point. Just, there's something you can think about for later on. I'm not sure where he gets his clothes in the next scene, but I'm kind of glad he did.
Dave has a question. I'm trying to unmute. I've clicked ask to unmute.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think he might have.
Oh,
there you go.
does it work now?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I mentioned in my question that I'm a film projectionist. And one of the great innovations in the presentation of motion pictures was the patent that Edison did not own.
Right.
That's referred to as, I'm not sure, is it Latham or Latham?
Yeah, I think it's Latham, the Latham loop.
That's what I sort of thought it was too. Now, film prints historically have been considered to be consumables. So that's why a bunch of prints that are in New Zealand, going back to the silent era, still survive, because Hollywood said, don't send them back.
Exactly.
So thank God for that.
Yeah, or if you've heard about the stuff that was found up in Dawson City, Alaska.
Oh, yes. And I went to a presentation here. I'm in Toronto now, and I went to a presentation at the Lightbox where Bill Morrison, I think, was there. And they talked about some of that stuff, which was totally fascinating. I was on the edge of my seat.
Oh yeah, Bill. I think that's one of the he actually had a 35 millimeter print made of that film and premiered it at our theater in Culpeper. And we had a huge crowd. I couldn't believe it. I didn't think anybody here would want to see it. We had a really great crowd, and Bill was there, and we had a lot of fun. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, the filmmaker named Bill Morrison, who has made a career out of making found films out of old footage. He specializes in deteriorating nitrate footage, and he's done, I don't know, between 10 and 15 films like this, and they're absolutely fascinating. But one of his best ones is this film called Dawson City Frozen Time, which is a documentary about the films that were uncovered up in Dawson City in the Yukon that were frozen in the ground, and how what survives of them is here in Culpeper too, in our vaults. And I've known Bill for years and years, and I always tell people, if you like his work, I help him find his stuff. If you don't like it, I'm his enabler.
Okay, if I could quickly ask a question, though, about this Latham loop. Now, it was patented around 1896. Hmm. And I just quickly checked a Wikipedia article, and they basically say that all the projectors after that, it was sort of like Edison didn't own this, so he was really unhappy. But everyone was happy because the prints could be run for quite a while. But as you point out, Edison's stuff ran for maybe 3 weeks. And how many runs do you get, even as short as they are? But I'm just curious. I know what shrinkage is about, and I know about what happens with cellulose triacetate. It's shrinkage, and you have to make repairs. It gets brittle and all that. But as you said, the Frankenstein sort of survives not too badly. And I have to agree, that's kind of remarkable. But I'm just wondering, do you see any signs like perforation strain in the surviving print? Because it would give some indication how often was it run, because it's really steady. It's not like it's jumpy or even the slightest amount. So it looks like either it was the director's copy, or it was something that was handled gently and maybe ran that first run and that was it. So what is it like for perf strain and things like that?
It has a little bit. I mean, yeah, the one side of the perfs are a little rough. I don't know if I can hang on one second. Let me see if I can find it. I've got some pictures. One moment, please. Let's see if I've got one that has the sprockets on it. And
at one moment in the print, you actually see the sprockets, the perforations in the picture. It shifts in and then it's out again, but yeah.
I'm sorry, I do not have, I had some frames that had the perforations on them, but if I can find one, I'll tell you, write to me at the library and I will send you an image with sprocket holes on it. If anybody has a question, I'll give you my email. GWIL, GWIL, at LOC.gov.
Could you say that again? GW?
GWIL, GWIL, at LOC, Library of Congress, .gov, government.
Oh, GWIL at .gov.
Put it up there, yeah.
Yeah, I put it in the chat too. There's a Jack made a comment about the 2015 Victor Frankenstein film with Daniel Radcliffe and James McAvoy. It has Radcliffe as Igor, and it starts with him as a clown, and his makeup makes him look like that Frankenstein monster.
Really interesting.
So I'll have to check that one out.
Well, also, I think for those of you who don't know what it is, I'll mention exactly what the Latham loop was. Basically, when you're running, here's a piece of film, okay, 35 film, and when they originally would run it, it would go over the different rollers and everything, and would go over tight like this. Okay, and it would run. You know, it'd go through a movement of some kind, and it would run. But the Lathams discovered that if you made a loop like this, and anybody who has a home movie projector has seen this, you'll have a little loop of film above and below the gate where it's being shown, and that takes the stress off the film. As long as you don't lose it, and then your film tears or it, you know, chatters through the projector. But as long as the loops are there on the top and underneath, then that takes a lot of strain off the film, and that's one of the things they found that helped make the film last longer. And those, I mean, projectors, what projectors there are today, those loops are still there above and below. Okay.
So there was a comment about the Mostly Lost Festival that Kirby and her husband had gone to, Library of Congress Festival. Is that something that, I know you work in Virginia, but is that a?
No, that's at our place.
That's your place? Okay.
Yeah, we didn't have it this year for obvious reasons. We are planning again. It's in the spring. Keep an eye. Look up Mostly Lost on Facebook. We've got a whole website. It's a really interesting thing. It's 3 days. We run films that we don't know what they are. They're unidentified. They've lost their chunks of films. There's bits of films. They've lost their titles, and the theater is full of people who amazingly know what these things are. I mean, some of they know things that people shouldn't have a right to know, but it's a lot of fun to be part of. I usually get to put together the big video programs in it, and then I get to sit back and watch everybody go, oh, that's so and so, and this and that, and this was from a Tuesday in 1914, and that's a 1917 Maxwell, and they only built those on full moons and things like that. So it's absolutely astounding. I highly recommend it. The biggest expense is getting to Culpeper. The program itself, I think, is like $40.
Well, it's a good thing there's still people out there that know how to do that stuff. And I have to say, we owe thanks to you, because there was several years ago you came and you looked at some films of ours to let us know if they had, we weren't sure about the damage to them or what could be done. And then you gave us a call after you went to the recycling center, and you had found some working film projectors that would now allow us to actually play some of the stuff that we have that you called us about. And you said, hey, they're out here at the recycling center, and we went and we picked them up. So now we actually have projectors and for slides and for film that we could use in the future. But unfortunately, I don't think any of us know how to properly use them. So
well, the next time I'm back, we'll make a time, and I will come and I will show you how to run your projectors. That would be great. It's important.
So it's important to keep those skills alive so that, all of these things aren't lost. I mean, I know you're digitizing them, but it's good to still be able to
it's good to know
how to do.
I'm amazed that I used to have a record player in the nitrate vaults in our workroom, and it was an old GE Wildcat, and put the record on, and then it drops it, arm goes over. And we had a group of students come one time, and these are like master of library science students, and none of them knew how to work a record player. I felt really, really old. So yeah, it's important to know these things.
Yeah, old and valuable.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? I say you do have that. You mentioned you had that other Méliès film. That one was pretty cool. It's got a lot of magic in it.
Okay, and then again, this is it stars George Méliès' favorite actor, George Méliès. And I would also put out, if you have not seen the film Hugo, shame on you. It's a grand entertainment. It really is, and it has a lot to do with love and families and film preservation. I think 3 very important things. Let's take a look at this last film here, and I'll come back right at the end if anybody has any questions for this one. This one is called Satan in Prison. It's from 1907. And again, the main player is George Méliès. Share it, and here we go. And there you go. I think the one thing I love about those, especially the ones that he does like that, is that it's obvious he's having so much fun doing that. He does seem like he just had a lot of joy that he loved sharing with people, which of course made it even harder when his company went down the tubes. So, anyways, thankful to people like Serge and the library and some others who have kept his stuff up there, and now we actually get to see it. It's great. Okay.
Anyone...
question from Kirby. Yeah, I'm sure if somebody wanted to pay for them, Méliès basically had it in their catalog that you could get any film in color if you were willing to pay for it. Oh.
Dave mentioned that we asked if the creation of the monster was done as a puppet, and it reminded of the Terminator, which is exactly what I was thinking when I was watching that scene, that it looked like the melting Terminator.
I'm sure it probably is. I don't know how big it is, how big the puppet was. But I'm guessing it probably is. You might want to. I haven't read that part in Fred Weibel's book. If he even was able to find out if it was a puppet or not, I'll look it up. I'll see if I can find out what it was. But it definitely was some kind of a puppet. Whether it was this big or this big, I don't know. Oh, I'm sure Harryhausen knew about Méliès. I'm sure. Well, of course, Harryhausen also. I think he worked for him. What's his name? The guy who did King Kong, the animator. But he worked for that animator as well, who also did films for Edison.
Willis O'Brien.
Thank you, Willis O'Brien. Oh man. So I'm sure that O'Brien knew of Méliès a little bit. So, but yeah, it's so nice now. There's a whole another generation. If they want to, they can know about Méliès. He has not been forgotten.
I say it's amazing what's out there on YouTube. I was looking up some more of his films today, and there are a lot.
Oh, there's lots of them out there. Yeah. Some of them don't look so good, but there's, like I said, there's some really nice DVD sets that have been put out, and I'm imagining they're going to work on another one for all this 8K preservation they're doing of the Méliès negatives, some of which I've shared. Serge has been sharing with me some of the results, and they are just astonishing. Some of them look like they were shot yesterday.
It's amazing what you said, like with the music, what a difference it makes. Because try and imagine those as completely silent. It's not.
Well, and I'm amazed.
Just don't work.
How many Méliès films actually do deal with musical themes, where the characters are definitely dancing to a beat? There's a great one where, which I actually have on Super 8. It was the first Méliès film I ever saw. He comes out, and they build a big music stave on the set, and he comes out and he grabs his head and he pulls it off and he throws it up and makes it into a note, and another one appears, and he makes all these heads, and all the heads are singing, and then he puts staffs on them, and then basically they end up playing the song God Save the Queen. The music as it's playing.
Jack asked if you could talk about the accidental 3D Méliès film.
Oh, yes. Okay. We said something about one thing about Méliès, since his business was becoming more and more international, and like I said, his brother Gaston was here in the States, he needed a second negative for US. And at this time, lab practices were not such where they could actually make a duplicate negative off the original. So usually they would shoot another one. Well, Méliès came up with this great idea, and he built his own camera that could take 2 rolls of film, and it had 2 lenses on the front. And so whenever they shot the film, they'd shoot 2 at the same time. So when they were done, they would edit 2 negatives. One would stay in Paris. The other would be sent to Gaston in New York to make American prints. Now, over time, of course, like I said, all the European negatives were destroyed, and all that were left were prints. Some of the American negatives still survive. And as Serge was beginning to do this reconstruction project on these different films, he began to notice that if there were shots where bits were missing, and he would find another print and he'd find that footage and put it in, it was the same footage, but it's like all of a sudden the set would move over and then it would move back. And they're looking at it, and they begin to find this more and more often. And they're like, wait a minute. And they did some research. They found out about this camera. And they realized that the lenses on the camera are about this far apart. So Méliès didn't even realize it, but he was actually shooting in stereo. So Serge went to the effort, and I myself have never gotten to see this. We were going to show it at Mostly Lost, but it turned out our stereo digital projector used a different system, and no one had ever bought the right glasses for it. So we never got to see it. But from what I have heard, it's really quite spectacular to be watching these, because I don't know if they actually have a complete one. They have bits and pieces, but all of a sudden the sets will suddenly go really deep, and they look like Viewmaster slides, because basically that's what they are. They're big flats. But the fact that here, and he would have loved to have known that himself, I'm sure, and he would have done something about it had he known. But yeah, that's just another added thing about Méliès, is he was shooting 3D movies in 1902, didn't even know it.
Do you know, Rachel asked if you know the name of Serge's Amazon store.
You can go to, I think you just go to lobsterfilms.com, I think. But he also sells the Méliès things through Flickr Alley. And you can get Flickr Alley stuff on just the regular Amazon store.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Does anybody have any other questions for George?
Oh, I like the question about took talent to thread a manual projector. When I went to Springfield North High School, I was in the AV department. We had two kinds of projectors. We had self-loading singers that were really, really easy. And then we had old RCAs that were really, really hard. And teachers had to mind their manners, because if they weren't nice to us, we'd give them the manual loading ones. Good times. Okay, any more questions?
Well, George, I want to thank you. That was a lot of fun to see those.
My
really
pleasure.
amazing what they could do over 100 years ago.
It really is.
And that we can still watch. So thank you for the work you do with the Library of Congress to preserve these works and for future generations to see.
And I'll try to come up with something else. There's still some interesting Springfield film people that you might not know about or might not know a lot lot about.
Well, I say we could maybe do something on Clark and McCullough. I know you've got some stuff about them. That would be an interesting one.
And interesting you mentioned that, because guess who owns the rights to Clark and McCullough now? Serge Bromberg.
Oh wow.
But we have the original camera negatives of what survives of their RKO shorts, and we've been scanning them, and wow, those look really good. And a few of the obscure Fox ones, I think one or two of their early Fox ones still are floating about too. Two fascinating characters. But there's also W.R. Burnett, screenwriter, and of course Lillian Gish is a major one that we could talk about. We can't mention Birth of a Nation, but we could talk about other things. But yeah, I would love to do some more. It's always great to see the folks back at home.
Yeah, we're happy to have you talk with us, and
I'm happy to be had.
So
wait a minute.
Thank you guys all for coming out tonight, and I hope you guys have a good Halloween.
Oh yes, have a spooky Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
That's right.
and have a good night.
And like I said, if any of you have movie questions or any other thing you think of, please. Really, Charles Ogle was from Steubenville. I had no idea.
Oh wow! I just realized there's more.
Let's see. Anything else we missed?
From Steubenville, yeah.
Steubenville. Maybe that's why I had that glassy stare.
Kirby said she was the first girl in the Seattle school district to have an AV card.
Oh.
So,
all right then. I will let you all go. Have a grand evening. Have a great. Hopefully, I'll get to see you all in person someday. We'll do one there at the center.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, thanks again.
All right, thanks
you, everybody. You guys have a great night.
Good night.
Well, I wanted to say to everybody, I hope you can stay dry tomorrow. It looked like a good day coming in for Friday and the weekend, but with Zeta coming in tomorrow, it'll probably be wet, a little bit windy, but. As I say to Marion, I'll see you tomorrow, on Friday. So have a good.
Yeah, everybody stay dry and safe and healthy.
And I was
brought to you by Dick's Weather Service.
Yes, thank you.
Yes,
my dad used to freak me out with one of those things. I haven't seen one of those in years. I'm having a flashback.
Oh, the iPod.
Yeah, the little eye guy. Yeah.
Thanks, Jack. All right. Thanks, guys.
Good night, all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.